Good afternoon to all of you, although I'm in Colorado where it's still morning. So, but welcome and congratulations on making the top 12 for the We the People competition. We're going to introduce ourselves and ask you to introduce yourselves and your teacher, and we'll go from there. We are going to ask you about question 1, just so that you know that. My name is Dan Taubman. I'm a senior judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado.
Everything in me wanted to give you a different name and see if you went, no, we know who you are. I'm still Lindsay Draper, Milwaukee County, retired from the bench.
Hi, all. My name is Thomas Mackey. I'm in the University of Louisville History Department and at the law school here at U of L.
Would you like to introduce yourselves and your teacher as well?
Good afternoon, judges. We are Unit 2. Our unit focuses on how the framers created the Constitution. My name is Allie, and in the fall, I'll be studying mechanical engineering at the University of New Haven.
Hello, my name is Tyler, and I will be studying computer science at Cornell University.
Good afternoon. My name is Srishti, and in the fall, I'll be studying biomedical engineering at the University of Connecticut.
Hello, my name is Erin, and I will be studying computer science at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. For now, we're all seniors at Trumbull High School. This is our teacher, Ms. Boland, and we thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Welcome again. I'm now going to read the question, and then we'll go from there. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? You may begin.
Tempers boiled in a stuffy room in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787. A once civil gathering of the young nation's prominent statesmen had lost its great coolness and temper, as Benjamin Franklin saw it, to the passions of the battlefield. Lines were drawn on the issue of equal versus proportional representation in the Senate, and neither the large nor the small states were willing to yield any ground. It was at this crucial juncture that our home state's delegate, Roger Sherman, proposed the Connecticut Compromise.
The delegates dealt with disagreements regarding slavery, sovereignty, the executive, and listing rights, to name a few. The framers understood that a government was necessary, but experience also taught them that a government with too much power was destined to become oppressive.
In the end, they created a document in which our life, liberty, and property were secured in 2 essential but structural ways. First, by the careful division and enumeration of power, and second, by the reservation of authority to the governmental entities closest to us, the states. The Constitution unified the citizens of the states under a centralized government that, unlike the Articles of Confederation, derived its power directly from the people.
The Constitution is, in essence, a skeleton, a foundation upon which all laws are built that is broad and flexible in interpretation, yet sturdy and clear in intention. This is why the Constitution needed ratification amongst the states, and why new amendments need this as well.
The first Congress resolved many of the unresolved issues in Philadelphia as they filled out the Constitution's skeletal framework. They created the judiciary, the first executive departments, and a revenue system. Congress assumed state Revolutionary War debts and decided the location of the nation's future capital. Under the leadership of James Madison, this Congress authored the constitutional amendments that would eventually become the Bill of Rights.
Several issues have been left unresolved, though, and the Constitution provides the vehicle to make those changes as needed.
The Reconstruction Amendments tackled slavery and citizenship, with the prohibition of slavery, the Citizenship Clause, and allowing citizens of all races the right to vote. The 19th Amendment would secure that right for women, while the Voting Rights Act of 1965 barred discrimination tactics at the polls. This issue still needs attention, however, with the aftermath of the Shelby County decision and former President Trump's attempt to dismantle the DACA program.
Selective incorporation derived from the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment solved the issue of the Bill of Rights not applying to the states. But this incorporation takes time. In 2019, the Excessive Fines Clause was finally incorporated in Tins versus Indiana.
Political parties were not addressed at the convention, and that has led to intense polarization and government shutdowns today. The McCain-Feingold Act of 2002 tried to reform campaign finance, but the floodgates opened with the Citizens United decision in 2013.
We believe that with the polarization of Congress, the rise of partisan gerrymandering, and the infusion of money into politics, The mechanisms created in the Constitution will not allow us to fix the issues of today. We need to fix those problems first.
Therefore, we propose adding an amendment that would protect the right to vote. It would guarantee all adult citizens the right to vote, establish a nonpartisan administrative body to run elections that would automatically register all eligible voters, and impose basic standards of voting access for state and local elections.
We also propose adding an amendment that would give Congress the power to regulate and set reasonable limits on the raising and spending of funds by candidates and others to influence elections, as well as to draw a distinction between persons and corporations.
Before these changes can be made, we need to amend the amendment process. As the late Justice Scalia observed, a population the size of Rhode Island can effectively block an amendment. He said it ought to be hard, but not that hard.
Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you very much for your opening statement. So I'd like to start off by where you ended in terms of your proposal to amend the amendment process. Why do you think the founders established the amendment process the way they did? And can you be a little more specific in how you would propose to revise that procedure?
I think they made the amendment process to be hard because they didn't want silly amendments to be passed. And we have seen silly amendments come through legislation in the past, like the proposal to outlaw millionaires. They wanted to change the name of the United States of America to the United States of Earth. And 4 presidents have tried to repeal the 22nd Amendment. And I think if the amendment process was less difficult and these amendments got passed, we would kind of regret them being passed. And I think that was exactly what the founders intended. They wanted them to be hard so these amendments couldn't be passed, and only the amendments that needed to be passed to keep this document a timeless document could be passed.
To answer the second part of your question, one idea that we have to amend the amendment process would be actually something that's proposed by Professor Rappaport of the University of California, San Diego, where you would basically take Congress out of the conversation completely. So a state would be able to propose an amendment and then send that proposed amendment to 2/3 of states to confirm its language, and then it would be sent to 3/4 of the states to officially ratify it. We know that with the 27 amendments that have been passed, none have been passed without Congress's approval. And so to believe that the state convention or the Constitution Convention method would work is kind of unplausible.
In addition, the founders intended the amendment process to be difficult, as Ali mentioned, because as Madison stated in Federalist 43, it guards against the extreme facility that would render the Constitution too mutable. However, I also believe that beneficial amendments, because since the amendment process is so hard, these amendments haven't been able to pass, such as the Equal Rights Amendment, which would have provided equal legal rights to all Americans, regardless of sex. And this is because of the high threshold of states which are required to ratify the amendment. So I would also propose reducing the number of states from 3/4 to 2/3. So amendments like these could be passed.
So let me ask you to help me on your suggestion that all citizens who are eligible be automatically registered to vote. Can you help me out with the word eligible? And where I'm going with this is, are you just talking about age? Is there any necessity that there be, for instance, some cognitive ability? Is there anything related to criminal behavior? What does the word eligible mean in your system?
Well, I think what we mean by eligible is anyone who currently qualifies to vote under the election program. And we see in many states, they have made it very difficult since the Shelby County decision in order to do this. For example, the Navajo in Arizona don't have a post office in range of 700 miles, leading it to be extraordinarily hard for them to even vote or register to vote. And our country is founded on the idea that all men are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, one of which is to vote. And by ensuring that all citizens, are able to vote and are accessing the information to vote, it allows our democracy to more effectively carry out the common good of the people.
mean, I assume you gathered from what I was asking. I was trying to get you to address, for instance, felony disenfranchisement. Because some states say if you're a felon, you're done. Some say, well, you can stop being a citizen. So that's what I'm asking you. Who determines the eligibility piece and what does that mean?
Well, I would say that in our amendment, I do think that felons should have the right to vote due to the fact that everybody in the country is affected by the laws that are passed. You know, our country was founded on the idea of no taxation without representation, and former felons are taxed, do pay taxes, and should be represented in the process because of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let me then launch in a little bit here for a moment. And the representation issue in its various forms and problems was the most debated issue at the federal convention. But the second most, and not that far behind, was the problem of the executive. In some ways, that was more troubling at the time for those delegates. Tell me about their problems with the executive, and is the executive we live with today proof that the anti-federalists were right?
I think the main problems that they were facing with the executive is how they would choose it. They were between congressional selection and direct election by the people. And those who believe that congressional election would be best would result in the ineligibility of the president to be reelected. However, Morris stated that this would reduce the result in no ability of the president to have the good behavior to act in the common good of the people, and therefore that method was voted out by the delegates. However, popular election of the president also was stated by Elbridge Gerry as radically vicious, as well as by Roger Sherman, by the fact that since people would be more inclined to vote for candidates in their own states rather from other states, because they would understand what's happening more in their own state than rather from candidates from other states, and therefore be more inclined to vote for candidates in their own states. And Madison also argued because of direct election, it would reduce the influence of Southerners in the election of the president. And therefore, I think that one of the problems was the fact that how would we choose our executive was one of the problems.
I think the other big issue that especially the anti-federalists had with the executive was just how much power could this branch obtain for itself. So Patrick Henry actually said at the asked at the Constitutional Convention, if your chief be a man of ability and ambition, what prevents himself from rendering himself absolute? And today we see that actually throughout American history, we've seen that issue come up time and time again, with President Lincoln's many presidents using executive orders, such as President Lincoln using an executive order to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, and President FDR with Executive Order 9066 and Japanese internment.
I agree. And I also think one big problem that the Anti-Federalists and even the Federalists didn't kind of address with the executive branch would be the pardoning power. And we saw in former President Trump's term, he used that a lot. He pardoned close to 140 people. And a lot of the pardonings that he did were people on his team. And that really is kind of an abuse of power, an abuse of the pardoning power, because the founders didn't intend that. And he even threatened to pardon himself if he got impeached. So I think that was definitely a power that they didn't really think would go too far. And I think he definitely took it too far.
So let me pick up on that and ask you, given the broad powers that some presidents have exercised, why do you think the framers created the executive power article that in such broad terms, as opposed to the article giving Congress the power where there are many enumerated powers?
Well, I definitely believe that the reason they made the executive so broad in its sense is due to the incompetence of the Articles of Confederation to carry out the duties given to it. For example, in terms of a common defense, the British held troops along 6 forts in the Northwest Territory around the Great Lakes region. The Spanish had a blockade in the south, and North African pirates were seizing American ships, and the Articles of Confederation government was unable to do anything about it. In addition, states were competing with each other with tariffs on each other's goods, not promoting common trade. And I think from this experience, they realized that the executive branch needs to be a bit more like not absolute in its power, was a bit more expansive in its power in order to ensure the common good of the people.
There was definitely this, as Tyler said, this big issue during the Articles of Confederation era where there was this question of who can enforce laws. For example, we had the Pennamite Wars, which was between the Connecticut Yankees and the Pennsylvania Pennamites, and asking who had jurisdiction over this land. And the Congress eventually settled that it was Pennsylvania's land, but because they had no real body to enforce it, infighting continued. And so there was this necessary person, this power, general power that the executive would have in times of crisis.
Would I be fair in saying that the Constitution was just the evolution that continued after the Articles of Confederation as we learned as we went along? You don't get to tell me, darn.
Thank you. Let's show our appreciation for the team.
Yeah, nice.
I think you did a nice job talking about the problems with the Articles of Confederation and leading to the issues that were discussed and resolved, and some not resolved at the Constitutional Convention. And you hit on, I think, the major issues. You might have said a little bit more about the issue of slavery, but I think you did a good job discussing the issues. I liked your mentioning of the Shelby County case as a focus on the need to expand voting rights, and as well as your mentioning of selective incorporation as a way that the Bill of Rights were implemented more widely and applied to the states throughout the country. I think your proposal to amend Article 5 of the Constitution so that amending the Constitution is easier, is intriguing, and I'm glad that you cited a professor's recommendation for that. That's a proposal that may be advantageous and may be disadvantageous as well. And in Colorado and many other states, the state constitutions are much longer than the federal Constitution. And it's not necessarily just silly amendments that are proposed, but there may be well-meaning amendments, but when they're ratified or enacted as part of the Constitution, that later makes it more difficult to change those provisions when that happens. And I liked your answer to the question about the role of the executive and the different ideas about the congressional selection versus direct election. That was good, as well as your answer about the article about executive power was as general as it was. I wonder if the founders were alive today, whether they would have the same view as they did then. But I think you did a really nice job, so congratulations again.
Yeah, I too thought this was a nice job. I thought you covered the waterfront, you threw out some interesting ideas. You've clearly engaged with these ideas and issues. I think you pulled us all up at the end with the amending process. As someone of the 19th century historian, I immediately go to the proposed, it happens, don't worry, Mr. Forsman, the proposed 13th Amendment of 1860, which was an unamendable amendment kind of idea. So we start playing with the amendment thing. So, but look, I thought you did a good job. You responded in questions, and you clearly had a grasp on what you were talking about. Well done.
You were fun to listen to again, and I commend you on a number of things. Really, it was kind of interesting to watch that little bit of and when Roger Sherman, who by the way was one of ours, that was just
Yeah,
kind of
right.
funny to see and because I almost, when you did the McCain-Feingold Act, I almost did a little dance because Russ Feingold was Wisconsin. But it was kind of, you were very interesting. I was very intrigued. I too caught the silly amendment comment, and I wrote down flag burning when that
Yeah.
came up. And I'm a little older than you are, so I remember when there were a whole bunch of people in the country who really thought that flag burning was so egregious that we ought to put something in the Constitution to say, oh no, I have to go. I'm being told I've talked too long.
I'm
Take-
sorry, that was an accidental click. My apologies. Please
But-
continue.
I just need to let you all know I enjoyed it. I'll be quiet, but good job, young people. Good job.
Thank you.
And
All right.
And before we close, Tyler, I just wanted to tell you that I'm glad to hear that you're going to Cornell. I went to Cornell many years ago, and so I'm sure you'll enjoy your experience there. So congratulations to all of you again. Nice job.
Thank you.